Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Royal Instinct. Today we're going to be watching a video by Rory Sutherland about pensions, property and the illusions of prosperity. He'll be discussing why pensions and houses are an important way to store your money. Okay, we are living in difficult times. We are living in times of crises. People have lost meaning in their lives. People have lost meaning in their communities. Okay, the reason for that is because the elites who run the world are siphoning off money from the top. They are bleeding their countries dry. They are bleeding the system dry. And there's only a few scraps left for the common folk, the people at the bottom, the people who try to work hard, who try to live good lives, but they are being priced out. Their savings and money stolen via inflation. Inflation is a phenomena that happens when you drive prices of goods up, when you reduce resources and people are losing their money. But let's jump into the video and let's see what he has to say.
For people who don't know your work, could you give us a brief explanation of what you do?
So I've worked in advertising for nearly 40 years, and
so this is a guy who, for those of you who don't know, he works in advertising. I believe he lived for Gilvey, and you know he's got a unique way of looking at the world, which people assume is unique. What he's done is he's a very crafty storyteller. He's crafted great stories to tell. He's quite interesting the way he presents himself, and people are drawn to him. People think that he has some sort of insight, when all he's really doing is reading off scripts and reciting books.
what I accidentally discovered was that what people in advertising and marketing do is quite important. However, what's really, really important is how they think. And we've probably made the mistake of promoting ourselves and justifying ourselves to finance on the basis of the short-term return of whatever it is we did. What's much more valuable is the insights that arise when you simply think differently. And all marketing means at its simplest level is you look at a business, or for that matter, a government or a policy, through the eyes of the people who experience it.
So basically, what he's trying to say is, when you have a business, you need to look at it from the side of the consumer, the person that you are selling to, what their experience is, how they perceive you, and having that insight, having that knowledge will allow you to make better decisions in order sell more of your product to gain more customers, right? What we do here at Raw Instinct, we present ourselves as we are. We don't care for how we are perceived. We show ourselves how we want to the world to see us. Okay, we turn up, we show who we are, and we find people who like us for what we represent and for who we are and what our beliefs and values are. The reason why we do that is because I believe, you can't go through life just constantly trying to work out what the little angle is where you can get a marginal gain. What you need to do is figure out who you are, present yourself to the world, and you find the right people who essentially want to fuck with you, who want to follow you, who are like-minded thinkers, who think like you, and who understand what you're doing, right? Like sometimes you meet someone, you don't really understand exactly what they're doing, but you get the vibe that, that they're a person who's like you, and you decide to follow them. You decide to, to engage with that person because you feel a kind of kinship towards that person.
The customers or the citizens, rather than, as tends to happen nowadays, through the lens of finance or economics or law. And I think those slightly aspergic disciplines have become completely over-dominant in decision-making relative to psychology.
And human behaviour.
And human behaviour and human perception, by the way. I'll give you just a little example.
So basically, what he's doing is he's dispositioning the alternatives. He is trying to go off what the psychological factors is, and by making a case for it, you already assume that he is a subject matter expert in that field, because he's willing to speak with it about that subject with utter confidence, and because he presents himself as a subject matter expert in that field. So it already puts him in a position of authority.
One of the worst things I think government tends to do is it imposes policies on people without a quid pro quo. Now, no business ever does this. It wouldn't say, we're just going to make this more expensive and we're not going to give you anything in return. It does happen. But what they try and do is create some sort of value exchange.
So basically, all he's doing is giving his opinion, right? But because he's speaking with utter conviction, because you get the feel that he believes the things that he says, your brain takes it as truths, okay? And right, and because it's on a YouTube video, because he's a guest at a radio station, because of the accolades given to him by the presenter, your brain sees him as a point of authority, so you're more likely to listen to what he has to say, okay? He is presenting himself as an authority, and therefore the audience is taking him as an authority. And that is what you should do. You should find your zone of genius. You should find the things that make you what you believe in, present it to the world, and people will respond well, in the sense of that they will see you for the authority that you are.
This, then that. Now, if you take 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in London, which I don't oppose, by the way, you would have achieved this with much, much less public pushback if you'd said, well, fair enough, we're imposing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit for most of London, but in return we'll get rid of the speed bumps. And people will go, yeah, OK, on balance, I'll take that trade-off. If you give people some sort of value exchange, generally speaking, people don't find it that difficult to frame it as a positive. If you impose
the authority that gives people what they want, you need to establish the company that you're building, the land that you're conquering, the kingdom that you are producing for people to live in, okay? If you want to be seen as a king, if you want to become a king, which is what we're doing here on this channel, I'm sending out a bat signal to find like-minded people who also want to establish kingdoms, because the elites can't be trusted. We are fighting for our lives. We are escaping this current system in order to build a less regulated monarchy for ourselves. We will be the benefactories, but we will be benevolent kings. We will be philosopher kings. People under our rule will live good lives.
Something which is entirely negative, different matter. And I don't think government's very clever in terms of how it effectively seeks. And I think the argument is, I think the problem is that people are trying to win a debate. They're not trying to solve a problem. And the mental tools, Jimmy Carr said something very similar. I always think comedians are particularly inspiring. They fundamentally think about things differently, and sometimes it's really useful. And we're optimized for debate rather than for discourse or deliberation. And
what you have to understand is the world is not a place where people take each other's points and on merit, right? What they do is they define you into a category of are you for me or against me, right? They put you into a position of, can you benefit me or can you not? And then it becomes a game of who wins the debate, right? And you should see it as a battle, and the winner takes all. People don't want to, they don't make rational decisions. They don't listen to you logically. What they do is it appeals to emotion, to find out, if you can beat someone in a debate, right, makes you basically stronger. And if you're strong enough to beat someone in a debate, you're smart enough to lead. And that is what most people believe.
Consequently, if you're trying to win an argument, generally speaking, what you're trying to pretend is that you have the single right answer. Discourse and deliberation are different. What you're trying to do is to reach an accommodation with people. It's much more, effectively, it's much more interactive, but also it takes advantage of certain psychological facets, which debate, i.e. trying to be single-mindedly right about something, completely misses out on. I was just joking to you earlier, saying that this huge problem your wonderful colleague Ian Dale had when it was revealed as he was standing as Conservative candidate for Tunbridge Wells that he had said some negative things about Tunbridge Wells in the past.
It turned out he had.
Yes.
He had
not
unfortunately.
that negative.
No, it wasn't that bad. It was,
Now,
just didn't like it.
the creative solution to this, as I said, is you simply had to swap constituency, and he should have stood for the constituency of Tunbridge next door, because if you'd made hating Tunbridge Wells the central plank of your campaign in Tunbridge, you'd be elected with a landslide.
Yeah, what he's picking up on there is basically that the world has become tribal. You're either for us or against us, okay? And if you can disposition the opposition to be shown as an enemy, right? Then if you shit on them verbally, if you make fun of them, people will cheer for you. People will, and because you're the one saying it, they will cheer for you because for them you're speaking a truth, right? And the best place to view these things is in football, for example, right? Let's take Arsenal and Tottenham, two London clubs who are both located in North London. You know, if you say Arsenal shit for XY reasons, right? 1, 2, 3, Arsenal shit because of these reasons, Tottenham fans will cheer you on because you're agreeing with their worldview, and you are you're lowering the respect or the status of the rival team. You're bringing them down a notch, right? And because you're the one bringing it down a notch, you're seen as contributing and you know, adding to the what's the word, the increase in status for Tottenham, right? And it happens vice versa.
Now, what I'm saying is
Tunbridge's loss is LBC's gain. He's still on the team.
He's still on the team, but there's a huge creative opportunity cost when you try and be right. Quite often the way to solve a problem is just to be interestingly less wrong.
So your job is to think differently and propose different ways of being that exist outside of a framework that we have got ourselves into, whether it's government, whether it's perhaps the media, other arms of the state, which is legalistic, slightly puritanical perhaps, and not particularly interested.
Yes, and also I think based on, and I don't know if you've ever had Gary Stevens
I have,
on
yes,
the programme.
multiple times.
He makes a very, very good point, which is nearly all economic models are based on the single representative agent model. The assumption that you take a kind of average person, and if you optimise for them, everybody's kind of equally happy. And he's absolutely right. Whatever else you think about what he says, and I agree with quite a lot of it, he's absolutely right to make that criticism, because of course in reality how people react to something, some stimulus, entirely depends on their individual context, personality.
And you know, you can see the difficulties in doing that if you're trying to appeal to the masses, if you're trying to appeal to the average person. You know, individuals are very complicated. They have their own biases, they have their own things of working, how they want things done, how they view the world. Okay, so that is why, you know, there is no point to try to appeal to the masses anymore, right? The world is being divided into groups, into their own tribal packs, and you can't, right? If you can't differentiate which people will fit into my group the most, right? So what we do is, because we are presenting ourselves as the kings, the people who are coming up with a new system because we are fed up of the current system. We're establishing our own system, establishing our own country to rule as we see fit, how we believe society should be run, and let people choose themselves. You know, if they want to be part of it, then they will select themselves. They will show up in your lives. They will tell you that, yeah, I agree with you and I want to be part of what you're doing. Okay. You know, it is basically becoming integrating all aspects of your personality to become a whole. So, you know, what Carl Jung calls the shadow, you integrate the shadow, you integrate all the aspects of life that you think are relevant to you, right? You build a whole personality, and you eliminate all fears and self-doubts. And once you do that, you're free to move forward as who you are, and let the people who choose you be part of your life, so that you can move forward and make real change in the world.
Perception and everything else.
So let's give us the stimulus of a new year. 2026.
The proportion of their after-tax salary they have to pay in rent. And then I realised that because they're only 24, they've never known a world that was any different.
Yeah.
And so you have to be about 50 years old to realise this is anomalous. And of course, if you are 50 years old, you don't massively care about the problem because you probably own a house.
Yeah, quite.
We also had, if you think about it, MPs for a period of 35 years whose principal source of remuneration was not a salary, it was a housing allowance. So we had an entire political class who were effectively bought a house in London.
So what you can see is like the system built in England, in London, was incentivizing people with the salaries that they were paying, with the literally, in essence, the properties that they were allowed to buy by the housing allowance that they were given. Okay. And what's happening now is people are trying to protect those interests. So it is in their interest to keep house prices up, which is bad for young people in the country, which is why there's a dating crisis, which is why there is a fertility crisis. People aren't starting families. There's a population decline. Okay, and the way the government is trying to solve it is via bringing in more immigrants. Okay, what should have happened is the housing market should have crashed in 2008 during the financial crash, and the housing market would have reset itself, and then you wouldn't have these problems down the line, 15 years down the line later on. But the governments will always just put a band-aid over it, and they won't fix the underlying mechanics.
And then we expected them to be somehow objective and fair about how you treat housing costs. If you think about it, if you've given every single MP £500,000 worth of Microsoft shares, it would be considered a massive conflict of interest. But because it's housing, we didn't apply the same strictures. Now, just for interest, we've all come out of Christmas, and all of us, I think, from the wealthier 25% of the population, find Christmas slightly overly consumerist. In other words, we're slightly horrified, our inner Puritans slightly horrified at the amount of money being spent on gadgets and, baubles and flashing lights and everything else.
Stuff that goes into landfill.
And so we're inclined to look at people and go, well, look at these people who are poor. They're poor because they've got a large flat screen TV and so on. It takes a sort of 50, 60-year time frame to realise, no. The thing that's keeping people poor is the cost of housing, which has continually gone up and up and up. The reason people have lots of consumer goods is, for the most part, that those things have become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah, so, because of international trade, because of manufacturing, because of progress in manufacturing, electronic goods have come down in price. However, assets and houses are becoming more and more expensive because there's no technological advancement, and there are certain laws and rules being applied to, so new houses are more difficult to build, in essence, right? Because the governments don't want to have more houses being built, because it causes a supply shock, which will bring down the price of housing, right? Which is good for new-time buyers, first-time buyers, people trying to get on the property ladder, but it's bad for people who have their retirement pensions tied to their real estate, right? The price of their property. Okay, what the governments are trying to do, they're trying to appease a voting bloc, and because people, if they feel like this government will keep house prices up, it protect my assets, in a sense, then they're more likely to vote for that group.
And mostly, not always, better.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things are a smaller and smaller part of our overall expenditure, whereas the cost of housing, if you're below a certain age and haven't paid off your mortgage, is becoming bigger and bigger. So there's a fascinating thing I read recently which amazed me, which is the typical American home in 1950, 1955, 1960. If you added up what they'd paid for all their possessions, which would be one or two cars, television, perhaps, oven, furniture, clothing, typically what they'd paid for all the bought goods in and around the house was about the same as what they'd paid for their house itself.
Oh, wow. Well,
So what he's saying is basically that the cost of a house back then was the same as all the cost of the goods, as in the beds, the dishwasher, the kitchen, the bathroom, like all the appliances and items that you have within the house, was the same price as the actual property within itself, right? Whereas now, the cost of the internal facilities, right, all the goods inside, is a lot smaller compared to the cost of the actual property that you house it in.
be anything like that.
Now, if you think about it, unless you owned art or a fantastic jewellery collection, it'd be impossible to find anybody in Britain whose possessions were worth more than their house, pretty much. I mean, there's probably going to be a limo driver somewhere, but apart from that, it's impossible. And so what you realise is that the extent to which I think the gains that have been notionally brought to us by ever more effective free market capitalism and globalisation and everything else have largely been mopped up in just effectively increased property prices. So
even though the cost of goods is cheaper than ever, people have nowhere, because of the cost increases in housing, in real estate and property, the overall package of that, basically the cost has gone up, which is why we're having a cost of living crisis. Rents are going up higher and higher, wages are not catching up fast enough, and people are struggling. Okay, and you can see that manifest in how people, are suffering in today's economy. AI is ready to displace a lot of people. People won't have jobs, and a lot of people feel stuck and feel like the system is broken. So what can we do? What can we do in circumstances like that? Is you have to leave the system. If you see that the system is broken and there is no fixing the system, you have to build a new one. Okay, so it is down to you. This is your opportunity to build a new system, to become somebody who is a person who establishes a kingdom, becomes a king, become a leader of people, right? This is the moment where you decide that you want to do something about it instead of just being a negative Nancy. The call to adventure is here. It is your choice if you want to take part of that. And I want to spend my time with people who think the same as me, who want the same things as me, right? We are forming the Amicis. We are forming a kingly alliance, the United Nations of Kings, and we will be victorious.
And particularly,
in a sense, we don't become rich, and we've also created this sanctified asset class in property where one of the reasons I wasn't totally averse to the mansion tax was simply that it was sending a signal to people that property could no longer be considered absolutely sacrosanct as a form of what you might call tax-free capital accumulation.
Well, I'd like to come to some solutions for what might remedy the problem that you have a light on, which I think actually, if you're listening and you are renting, you can well understand as a massive problem, because frankly, you are paying as much as you would do to own the house via a mortgage, but you don't own any bit of it. I heard you say the other day, perhaps rather mischievously, that there's a problem in government with older people.
Yes, we're worried massively about paedophiles in government. We also need to worry about gerontophiles.
Yeah, I mean, there are many paedophiles in government. There are many paedophiles in position of power. They are using human trafficking rings in honeypot schemes and blackmail operations to gain leverage over you so that you make the decisions that the elites want you to make. I don't know if I went on Twitter this morning and all the Jeffrey Epstein shit is coming out. Apparently Jay-Z's involved. Bill Gates is massively involved. Donald Trump's been compromised. Prince Andrew has been compromised. These are names that have been floating around for a long time, but now there is more and more evidence coming out. Okay, and this is a wake up call to show you that you can't trust these people. Who's been compromised, who hasn't. Okay, who has sold out, who hasn't. It looks like that everybody has sold out, right? And even if there are good people still in positions of power, right? but they don't know who else has been compromised, right? So they're now selling each other out. They are just in it for themselves, because you have to be to protect yourself and your future generations, right? And we don't want to be stuck at the bottom, enslaved by a system, by CBDCs, by 24-hour surveillance, a surveillance state, locked in by digital IDs, locked into the metaverse, being controlled by AI. We don't want that. So that is why we are establishing a new land, a new nation. We are establishing our own kingdoms.
In government, which is the extent to which the elderly seem to be favoured by the tax system in all kinds of ways, despite the fact that they...
You're going to get so much hatred now.
No, but this is, I think, important, which is your ability to tax any particular group is really determined by the Daily Mail, which is to what extent you can create a sob story.
So he's he's basically taking the piss right now. He's dispositioned the alternatives, calling basically people who read the Daily Mail very reactive. So if you're able to piss people off via the Daily Mail and its audience, then you are able to cause a ripple effect to bring about policy change
around the affected group. Now, I'm not particularly well disposed towards six-figure earning investment bankers in London as a group. But
you're not going to get a violent
I'm not going to. But they are undoubtedly inordinately heavily taxed. If you earn a conventional salary working.
Yeah, and that is how the system is designed. It's like, if whether you agree whether investment bankers should receive the salaries that they do for the work that they do, but you are somebody who, like say if you're a good person working hard and you're heavily taxed, essentially you just end up spending 4 or 5 months, 6 months in some cases of the year working for free, because the salary that you make is your contribution towards tax. I believe income should not be taxed. I believe tax should be only at the point of sale. So whenever a transaction occurs, that is when the government should be able to get a cut of that transaction, because the government is the provider of the provider of the platform where the transaction can happen. It's like if you're a seller on eBay or a seller on Amazon or eBay provides the platform for you to make your sales, right? So then you can buy and sell on that platform, but for each transaction that happens, the platform, right, Amazon or eBay, will take a percentage cut. It will take its fee, right? And that's how the government should act. And it will incentivize people to work harder. It will incentivize people to spend more as well, because people feel more wealthy. People feel that they have more agency over their lives. People have more control of their finances. And when people feel more wealthy, they are more likely to take bigger risks, spend more money lavishly, and it will really increase and boost the economy.
Working for an employer and you're paying 45% tax, there's a group, I think it's about 10% of people who pay about 50% of income tax, for which they receive no gratitude whatsoever, by the way. Now, one of the reasons why they pay so much tax is simply that it's impossible to create a plausible sob story around any member of that group. They're in employment and they're earning a lot of money. By contrast, there are an awful lot of elderly people sitting in, 7-figure homes, 5-bedroom homes, which they occupy either as a couple or as a lone individual. If you impose any kind of property tax which would simply force one widow to move house, you've got a sob story. And so there does seem to be something which I think probably got worse during the Blair administration, where you governed effectively as a form of press relations, where undoubtedly we allow a degree of sanctity towards property ownership, and the idea that someone being forced to move out of their home is an absolute abomination. Now, if you ended up with two...
but how the current setup, the government is set up, we're going to end up with government having more and more control over how people are allowed to live, how people are allowed to spend their time, right? So if the government wants you to move out, if you don't like what you say, if you say anything online, which that the government, the administration doesn't agree with, then they will ship you out no matter what. Okay, so that is why, for your own safety, for your own access to freedoms, you need to build a kingdom and become a king.
£2 million worth of shares, and you said, I'm running out of money. Someone was able to sell some of your stocks.
Well, I remember getting a call from a bloke who was genuinely worried about the price of his weekly shop going up by 12 quid, 15 quid.
Oh, yes.
His house was worth £1.7 million with no mortgage. And you can make the decision to live in a cash-poor environment with a massive £1.7 million house, or you can make the decision to sell the £1.7 million house and be cash-rich and have a slightly smaller house.
And what we've done by making it effectively immune from capital gains, all kinds of inheritance perks and so forth, is we've encouraged people to put a disproportionate... I mean, you're a big pension campaigner, I think, right?
Okay. Campaigner, I'm glad it's got to you.
But by the way, you still don't realise how good a pension is, because you have to be about 55 before you realise the compounding effect.
Sure.
Okay, so it's one of those things where it's very, very boring early in life.
The thing is, though, a lot of pensions are at risks. We are currently going through a time where the stock market is overinflated. A lot of pensions are tied to the stock market. And if there was to be a big correction, a huge sell-off in the stock market, then you will see great panic, because a lot of people will lose access to the pensions. They will lose the funds inside of their pensions. Okay, that is why you cannot be tied to a system that you have no control over. Right? Like just this weekend alone, I know that there was a big, there was the price of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies came down vastly this weekend. There was lack of liquidity, and a lot of liquidity that was leveraged was basically drained out, and people were already panicking. Okay, now that is just the cryptocurrency market. However, cryptocurrency is tied to stocks, and I think on Monday, which is tomorrow, you will see a huge sell-off in stocks, which is also tied to the news of these new allegations and evidence coming out because of Jeffrey Epstein, because you'll see who really is compromised, and a lot of these people are high, CEOs as well, for big companies. So a lot of people are uncertain about the position of the US economy right now, which is why you will see a stock market crash this week, this month, and all throughout this year. For the next couple of months, you'll see a big correction, which is why you can't bet everything on your pension, because if your pension is tied to stocks and shares, and the market goes down, then you lose a lot of your net worth. Okay, which is why we are trying to build a system outside of the current system, so that we don't suffer any external shocks to our livelihood, to our economy, to our net worth. Right? What we are doing is we are building a kingdom. We are funding our kingdom. We are coming up with new sources of energy, which we will bring to the world. We will have new, cheaper, alternative energy, so we can displace oil, and we will become big global players.
Pension, and then suddenly when you're about 55, 60, you go, where did this money come from? We've encouraged people to put their money into an illiquid asset to which they are inordinately attached sentimentally. It's not a great form of saving, that's what I'm saying.
That's why properties isn't the best place to park your money, right? It is illiquid. It will take you, it's about, at least half a year sometimes to sell your house, to sell your property, to get your money out. Then you have to pay taxes on it. You have to pay a bunch of fees on it. And then most people will just park that money in a new property, in a new piece of real estate. Okay. Or they'll move that money to the stock market. And then you are at mercy of the market. You're at mercy of what the elites and Wall Street is doing.
And the extent to which people, I think, have used the property market as effectively as an investment vehicle rather than I'm getting Marxist here.
You are a little bit. You're getting into
bit.
100% inheritance tax and things like this.
It does strike me that, for example, inheritance tax should vary depending on how many children you have. It should be paid at the level of the recipient, not at the level of person who dies.
Let's get to calls, for that is what this hour is about. Lots of people getting in touch. Dave is in Broxbourne. Dave, you're through to Rory Sutherland. Your question, sir.
Thank you. Happy New Year, both. Rory, thank you. Extremely interesting comments. I just wondered if we could hear your view on the welfare debate in terms of the way you see that unfolding and your views around the rights and wrongs of it, acknowledging that it's really important that we have a very strong and sensitive welfare state.
Well, Dave.
So, you have this person calling up into a radio show asking for the views of Rory Sutherland. Why is he doing that? It's because people are looking for guidance. People are looking for leadership. People are looking for subject matter experts, real people who have a bigger understanding of the way the world works. And the reason they ask is because they're trying to gain confidence. They're trying to gain more clarity from that person. People don't trust themselves. Naturally, they always look to a point of authority. When you're a child, you look towards your parents. When you're at school, you look towards your teachers. And as you grow up, you look towards your bosses, the people in charge, your leaders, your politicians. You always outsource your thinking and your authority and the people in charge of your life. Okay, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to take back that control, because I am somebody who has seen that the system is not working, that the elites are not working in my favor, and therefore we are establishing a new system, a new kingdom, so that we can rule and have access to our own freedom.
Dave has done is put a landmine underneath you, Rory.
He has, absolutely.
And he's inviting you to step on
No,
it.
no,
Fire away.
I have no... one of the things I avoid is this kind of ideological opposition to money spent by the...
He's trying to play it safe right now, because he's trying not to offend anyone. He's got a really good job right now, right? Like he gets paid a bunch of money, to do these podcasts. He gets, I'm assuming some sort of sponsorship deal, some sort of book deal, and he's getting very famous and viral, for his interesting and quirky ideas. So he doesn't want to offend anyone from any side, right? So he will take the safest option. He'll give the safest answer. And, in the big picture, his answer doesn't even matter. It's not like he has any political sway inside Parliament. It's not like he's going to run for office or anything like that, right? What he's trying to do is just keep the grift going, keep on giving his fanciful answers, and, being literally like singing a lullaby to a child, to putting them to sleep, to make them feel a lot better. So just like this caller is phoning in now, trying to get some sort of insight, some sort of clarity, Rory Sutherland is just going to basically, just tap him on the back, give him a little hug, be like, there, everything's good, everything will work out.
The state, as opposed to money spent by the individual. Depending on the state of affairs in a country, depending on a whole load of factors, the ratio between money spent collectively and money spent individually needs to vary. And to be honest, I've always been fairly persuaded, by the way, by the simple benefits of some degree of wealth redistribution, in that £100 to someone poorer makes much more difference to their life and happiness and well-being than the same amount of money given to someone who's already rich. So I can see a perfectly utilitarian argument for redistribution. I would also argue, aside from anything like that, it's simply a mark of a civilized country how well it looks after people who are in any way,
Yeah, the welfare state, basically, right, it's a safety net for people who fall on hard times to prop themselves up and get back on their feet, right? However, you have many people who end up scamming the system, who end up depending on the system too much. And, it becomes hard to assess who is being genuine and who is not, right? When markets, economies get too big, and if the welfare system gets too large, you're always going to have people who are trying to take advantage of that system. And then the people who are, just working hard, kind of get upset and jealous because they're seeing their hard work not rewarded, and people misusing their labor to get free handouts via benefits.
Unfortunate. The phrase always used now is the most vulnerable in society, which I'm not sure is a helpful phrase.
Why?
I think there are instances, and it comes back perhaps to that sob story problem I talk about, there are instances where one thing I think that well-intentioned people on the left are slightly naive about is the extent to which people will game the system.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. You know what I mean? Like if you can get something for free, right? If you can game the system, if there's a little hack where you can get some sort of benefit, okay, people will always try to find a loophole. People will always trying to find a way to leverage themselves, okay? That is why we are building kingdoms with people that we trust, people who we can rely on. We are building the Amicis, people who are our true friends, people who have our backs, people that we can rely on, okay? Communities are dead. The current system is broken. People feel more and more isolated and lonely than ever. And what we are doing is we are finding the people to give them an alternative to come and live within our kingdoms, and find true meaning, find true happiness, find true community and true friends. Amici is Italian for friends, which is why we use that word around here. So, you know, we join the Amicis and live a life of prosper.
And it's worth noting that there are various things you've probably heard about. The Motability scheme has been debated and so forth. There are various things where perhaps we have excessive altruism. In other words, our altruism isn't always very well directed.
Well, that is the sob story, isn't it? I guess the next person lines up to be the subject of the sob story about their gosh, I'm going to step on the landmine here, about their degree of vulnerability.
Yeah, you can see that they're very nervous about what they speak, what they don't speak, because they're trying not to offend anyone, right? But what you have to realize is there's always haters in the world, right? That people are always going to be offended by what you do, no matter what. Okay, so there's always going to be people who are ready to point out the negative and discredit you. Okay, like me, for example, like I do this. You know, I've been doing this YouTube channel for a couple of years now. I had a bit of a break, but now I'm back, and already like this week, you know, my first week back live streaming, I've already had like tons of negative comments saying, you know, that they don't understand what I'm saying, right? And basically then they're calling me like I'm doing something wrong, but what I'm doing is only for very few select people who understand what I'm doing, people who understand what I'm about, people who think like me, and people who want to join what my cause.
Yes. What do we mean by how vulnerable do we want to allow people to be before the welfare state, taxpayers, step in to help?
And I suppose you could argue there's also a kind of, if you believe in, you know, reasonably collectivist society.
The thing is, if you abolished income tax, then a lot of people would be more willing to work because they get to control their income, their finances, right? And then the decision is left, because it's untaxed, is when you buy and purchase something, right? And because the taxation happens at the point of sale, you're 100% in control of your financial success at that point, right? Because you're budgeting and limiting and spending the money as you see fit. Okay, and then, you know, if you minimize the welfare system and you collect money to just support the infrastructure, a lot of what you'll see is the market will solve a lot of its problems by itself, because for any problem that there are in an economy, in a capitalist system, the market will find a solution. Okay, and you know, I'm not saying 100% go for 100% capitalist society, because that's got its own problems as well, right? So have limited welfare, have limited government intervention, have limited taxation, as in no income tax, but tax at the point of sale, so that the people in the economy feel a lot more wealthier, a lot more powerful, and have more leverage over their own decisions.
I don't mean wholly collectivist.
Yep.
I'm not talking about, you know, Mao's China or something of that kind. Can you also be extraordinarily deferential to outlier groups? Because in some way, the two are actually contradictory, if you think about it. If, you know, in other words, if you give an extraordinary degree of sympathy to, you know, very small groups, out of all proportion to the remaining 98% of people, it's rather like an analogy I'd use, which is, you can't really run a restaurant. I always make this an analogy about freedom of speech and comedy, which is you can't calibrate comedy to the most humorless and easily offended
Correct.
1% of society. It's simply not realistic. And of course, we're in a society where
Yeah, you have to realize this is, whatever you do, whatever you say, some person's going to be offended. Some person is going to find something wrong with what you do. And you just have to be strong in conviction and realize that you are not here to make everyone happy. You're just here to find the people that think like you, who are like-minded like you, and give them what you want instead of looking for the people who don't want what you want. Okay. And if you do find haters, if you do find negativity in the world, just move on. Okay, there's 10 billion people in the world, and you just want to find the few hundred people, the few thousand people who understand what you're doing, who understand what you're about, and those are the people that you need to work with.
everybody has disproportionate power to complain, and also where they have disproportionate power to find other people like them who want to join in the complaint. Now, you can't run a restaurant which only serves food to which nobody in the world is allergic. I'm very, very tolerant to people with allergies, people with food intolerances, but there comes a point at which your level of, I suppose, deference to outlier groups starts to become slightly distorted.
Do you think that that has happened maybe on the welfare issue around areas of...
It's not just the welfare issue. It's like because everybody's connected to the internet, you can now find pockets of people who are like you, who think like you, who want the same things as you, right? So say if you have a food tolerance, if you're allergic to like gluten, if you like, let's say you only eat a tuna fish diet, okay? That's very niche, right? But you're more likely to find people like you today because of the internet, because everybody is globally connected, right? So then you were like, just like 10, 15 years ago, okay? And because of that, like you should unapologetically be yourself, because you will find people in this world on the internet who understand what you're doing and who understand what you're about, and those are the people that you really want to be friends with. Those are the people that you want to strike ventures with.
Whether we call it neurodivergence or mental health, there's a 98% of people who are fortunate enough not to be afflicted with a variety of kind of things, who look at the level of altruism or violin playing for a particular group and say, hang on a minute, that's out of kilter.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, I've got a slight reef through the eyes of the people.
Yeah, it's a lot of virtual signaling. It's that's going on. So in a system that rewards that sort of activity, you're going to get a lot of virtual signaling, and a lot of people try and take advantage to gain a political career, to gain more fame and status.
In terms of the obvious cost incurred, or indeed the salaries of the people involved necessarily. It's the opportunity cost. It's the number of things which never happen because it's simply too slow, too uncertain and too painful to do anything.
And
anybody who's involved
in
building an extension or adding a conservatory to their house.
Have you heard of much of what Dominic Cummings has had to say about the
Blob is his great
the constitution of the civil service?
And what you're starting to see actually is people on both the left and the right. There's quite a large group in the Labour Party, I've met a few of them, who effectively are coming to the conclusion that the Blob is to some extent the problem, that we've created... there's a similar movement in the United States, by the way, which it actually largely emerges on the left. It's sometimes called the abundance movement, who argue that something happened about the left where they, instead of effectively, in the 1930s, the left would be, we want your postman to be able to buy a hot tub. It was about material well-being. It's got all entirely about prevention to a point where any form of economic activity just becomes too high friction for it to take place at all. And the way in which, by the way, I mean, slight Angela Rayner defence here, okay? Richard, Angela Rayner, I think left school at 16.
Yep.
And she got into huge trouble for effectively some mistake, which could be intentional, could be accidental, in terms of the payment of stamp duty. Now, I've got a Cambridge degree, admittedly only in classics. My
Sorry.
father worked in the property industry. I have no clue how stamp duty works. I don't understand how VAT works. I run my own business to a degree, and the extent to which about 50% of that effort in the business has to be directed towards dealing with some form of paperwork or other, most of which I completely have to effectively deposit on my wife simply because I can't understand it.
Yeah, a big problem is the UK tax code. The UK tax system is one of the largest pieces of legislation across the world. It is the most complicated tax code in the world. So I'm not surprised that he is finding that difficult.
I say ChatGPT, but your wife is just as good.
But I wouldn't entirely trust ChatGPT to do that, actually. I think that would be a bit dangerous. But the extent to which fairly straightforward things, like building an extension or starting a business of any kind, or actually the private sector is just as bad here. If you tried opening a bank account, okay, first of all, you spend...
Yeah, there's too much legislation, too much red tape to do anything, which is, causing a slowdown in people's chances to even take control of their own lives, because the red tape, the systems put in by governments, by businesses, because they don't want you to do anything easy and smoothly, that you can get progress, okay? But if you reduce the frictions, you're more likely to, then you can start businesses quicker, you can transact quicker, you can make more money quicker, but that is not what the elites want.
About 3 weeks proving you're not Pablo Escobar or something. Then there's some money laundering thing. Then you have to send a phone. And to be honest, I tried to open a business credit card account. I just gave up because it was too much trouble. And the extent to which within business, by the way, there are these strange departments within business like HR and compliance, which are kind of weird internal monopolies, which make it almost impossible to do anything.
Right, so we've got HR, compliance...
Yeah, so he's basically complaining about too much red tape, too much bureaucracy.
We've got old people with big homes and Ian Dale, currently the targets of Rory Sutherland.
I was defending him.
No, I know.
I was trying to find him a way out.
Andrew is in Northumberland. Andrew.
Hey, good evening, Tom, and good evening, Rory. It's an absolute
Andrew.
pleasure. I'm a big fan of both of you. So I'm the founder of a tech startup, an early-stage tech startup called Jobber. It's like a headhunting platform. And it's kind of working really well. It's just released version 1 after having our MVP out, and we're a 2-man band, but I do everything commercially. We're bootstrapping. It's working well. We're slowly building up a client base. We've got some unicorns using it, all sorts of companies using it. They're more than halving their hiring costs. But I'm a 1-man sales machine, and I'm using tech for emailing and everything. But cold calling is by far the best way to do sales, and
cold calling is dead. That is not the best way to do sales. What you need to do is you need to market yourself. You need to show people who you are and allow people to choose you to come into your sphere of influence, and they will make the best customers for you. Okay, like would you not rather your customer base be people that you know will benefit from your product, okay? And wouldn't you want to buy from somebody that you trust, okay? And who would you trust more than a friend? Okay, so that's why it is in your best interest to build your kingdom, find like-minded people, make good friends, okay? Because they will be your best business partners, they will be your best customers. They're the people who will trust you the most, and that is when sales become easy.
But I'm only one person, and so it's slow. There's not much to dislike about it if you're a business that uses agencies. So it's quite a good sell.
Andrew, I'm rudely going to move you to a question. You've done your sales pitch. It's absolutely wonderful.
Sorry. So we've got about 10. We stretched to 10K on a marketing spend to try and blow it up. What would you do nowadays? There's so much rubbish out there that's expensive. I don't want to plow it all.
With 10K, the best thing that you can do is you can start your own YouTube channel to try and filter out people who think like your customers already, right? So if you want to, say if you sell some type of cutlery, okay, but you have a specific market, right, a specific type of person in mind for that, right? Then you should make content based for that person, right? So then when you post it on YouTube, that type of person will find your content, and as soon as they see it, they'll recognize it for what it is, okay? And then you already create a funnel for people to consume your goods, to buy products from you.
All on LinkedIn ads. You know, what if you had 10K and you're in my shoes, what would you do to really make it boom?
It may be that expanding your use of the telephone is absolutely the right thing to do. One of the things that is interesting in the tech world is that it's an article of faith in anybody in the tech world that you try and remove carbon from the system, i.e. any kind of human wetware, wherever you can, and you automate everything. In other words, you know, you will have a very, very tiny argument in a tech world.
And that's a lot of what like people like Sam Altman, OpenAI are trying to do. They're trying to remove, you know, any human doing any of the work, right? And they're trying to automate everything so AI is doing it, okay? Which is why you're seeing inflated numbers in AI valuations, which is why you will see that the AI bubble will pop, and it will cause huge ripple effects in the stock market, in the wider economy.
If you say, we found this way of automating email. If you go into a tech company and say, we think we should use physical direct mail, for example, you will have a massive uphill struggle, even when the physical direct mail proves to be extremely effective. A large part of tech adoption, I think, is ideological. I don't think it's actually empirical at all. I think it's
yeah, a lot of people are just worshipping tech as a solution to their problems, because especially all these billionaire CEOs in tech, they are selling their souls for it, because they think that is the future, that they're trying to implement transhumanism. They're trying to merge with technology. They're trying to make AI its god, so that they can rule over you as a human, okay? That is not the system that I want to live in. I want to escape that system, which is why I am building my kingdom.
It's a fashion, it's an ideology, you know. The kind of replacement, all kinds of things like the replacement of human checkouts with self-checkout. It's simply too easy, I think, in the modern business world to say we need to cut costs and technology will do the job for us. And there are some things like sales where maybe the use of the telephone, in other words, old media, are still the best thing to do. Moreover, you have another advantage when you use old media, which is even when you succeed, your competitors won't copy you.
Because no one's going to be as mad.
Because no one's going to be as mad as to use. Now, interestingly, there's a very large tech company I talk to quite a lot, and they refer to their physical direct mail, which they send out, as annoyingly effective.
Oh, really?
Which is a very strange thing. It's extremely cost effective, but they feel instinctively that as a tech company they shouldn't be using paper-based communication or dead trees or whatever to reach people.
You have to understand, a lot of time humans, they don't go for what actually works, because they have certain preconceived notions of how it should be, and if those notions aren't met, then they are disappointed, okay? Because they're a tech company, they feel like their best marketing solutions will be also related via tech, but because it is still by direct mail, physical envelope going to their customers, because that is the most effective, they are kind of annoyed by it, because especially people in technology, they end up kind of worshipping that field because that is what's most relevant to their life. You know, when you have to go back to an old method of communication, you know, the purpose of tech doesn't seem as good anymore. So basically they kind of are annoyed by it.
So you have this strange thing where an awful lot of tech adoption, I think, is probably driven by ideology rather than by proper experimentation.
Well, Andrew, as they say on The Wolf of Wall Street, pick up the phone and start dialing. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Eddie, I'll come to you in just a moment. I have to ask you a question on politics. I don't know if you've been able to glance to the screen to your left. You would have seen Donald Trump, the President of the United States, talking about largely everything for the last hour and a half to Republican members. As an ad man, how will you persuade Donald Trump not to either invade Greenland or, by doing so, rip up the NATO alliance?
You'd probably have to persuade him, as someone managed once with a Roman emperor, to persuade him that the real power play is not to do something. You know, I think there was a Roman emperor who was told the most powerful thing you can do is not to actually have someone killed, it's to forgive them. You'd have to reframe the whole thing in Trump language. Now,
like, but because he was able to memorize that story, and he was able to remember it and tell it in real time. He is seen as somebody very clever who studied history. It might be the only bit of history that that guy knows, and he was able to use that story in that context at that moment, right? But because he did, right, the perception is to the viewer that he is somebody who's very versed, highly versed in history.
10% of me will defend him on two grounds, one of which is that he is, for all his many, many manifest faults, an extraordinarily potent communicator, and has discovered a way of effectively reaching audiences and effectively, you know, being an attention magnet, which 95% of politicians have totally failed to do. We've had a few here.
The reason Trump is able to do that is because he is being himself, right? And, you know, Trump is not a guy with honor. He is not a guy who is you know, has any values. All he believes is in money, and as long as he's making money, he's being himself. And you know, money's great. We love money here at Raw Instinct, but we are going for bigger and better goals. Okay, we are establishing new economies, we're establishing new land, we're establishing new territory. The reason we're doing that is because we're fed up of the system. We are trying to escape the system. We are establishing a new system, a system ruled by us, a system of kings, where we are the one and only people in charge of our lives, and have the freedom to do everything and whatever we want. If you understand what I'm doing, if you understand what I'm saying, join the Amicis, join the cause that I'm fighting, become an Avenger. This is your call to adventure. Become the hero in your own life. Get rid of the self-doubt, get rid of the fear, and come work with me, and join territory and take over the world with me. But that is it for today. Thank you very much, and goodbye.